Hey, player. This is the DM of Unleashed here. Whatever you get around to creating your character, this is kind of some backstory that wasn't given to you based on the updated universe. I'm not sure if you'll get a copy or not. None of the other players did yet, but it'll be in the background here. This is just kind of some details that might help you shape the kind of character you want to make. Everyone currently lives, without further ado, I guess, everyone currently lives in a system, and the system's name is Ilios. There's three planets in the system that are known. There's Illyria, Davos, and Rathma. Davos is like kind of the Mercury of this system. It's a volcanic planet with it's largely devoid of life. And when I say largely, like people aren't really sure what's there. It's the closest to the star, but like there doesn't seem to be any signs of life as far as like being able to reach out with communications or anything like that. So definitely no higher life. Probably unlikely given the, the planet's surface. Rathma is the furthest away. It's an ice planet largely. It's covered by ice, but it actually does support wildlife. There's actually a decent bloom of wildlife near the equator where it's a little bit more temperate, but the overall planet is very cold. It's covered by large frozen seas, but there are some islands here and there, and there is some like ice kind of life, which you expect on a hot kind of place. But it's definitely very cold overall, very inhospitable, and no one really goes there. Uh, yeah, your planet Illyria is largely one big landmass. I'll show you a map of it later. Um, it has pretty varied climate from hot deserts to tropical areas to cool temperate regions to high mountainous regions with snowy ice caps, and then like towards the extreme pools. It's a little on the cooler side, but it's not like to the degree of Earth with its like ice caps or anything like that. There's two moons, Nessa and Orin. Nessa's pretty low gravity, low atmosphere. There's some plant life, but like it's very limited, very primitive. Uh, it's like tends to be on the simple side, and there's no evidence of animal life. Orin is very high gravity by comparison. Like it's about like I think it's about two times the gravity of Illyria, and there is some plant and animal life there. It's but no higher sentient life or anything like that. People believe the reason there's life on Orin is well, we'll get to that later. Okay, the history of the universe is actually well, the known history of the universe is actually kind of finite. And when I say 10,000 years ago, I don't mean like 10,000 years to the day that the game starts. It's around 10,000 years. People's timekeeping wasn't exactly perfect when this happened. But 10,000 years ago, there was a ship called the Morning Star that landed, crashed, slash broke up, coming to Illyria. And it was like basically a large refugee ship. Um, there were about 600 Arcadians. They're believed to have uh, be like the owners of the ship. Like they were kind of the crew, but like I said, obviously not every member was a crew member. Like some were family, stuff like that. There was about 1,000 Ethereum, 800,000 Anvari, 1 million humans, 50,000 Legion, 10,000 Scions, 20,000 Dara, and 5,000 Solarians. So that's kind of like the original population uh, that was brought. So, and like I said, when you hear the numbers like 1,800,000, you can imagine it was a very large ship. A lot of these people were basically in stasis type pods uh, to cover what was assumed to be a long journey. It's widely believed in history that the Arcadians rescued these people from a galactic war that was like wiping out entire systems. But this is only hearsay. Like no one. Here's where it gets a little weird. No one has any memory, including the Arcadians, of what happened when the ship crashed and how they got to the planet and what was happening beforehand. People have just kind of pieced together some stuff over the years, over the centuries and millennia, I guess it would be. But like at this point, it's kind of a distant memory. Like no one knows what was going on out there. and no, nothing. There's been no evidence of it in the last 10,000 years. All I know is the ship with a lot of different species was on it. They crashed on this planet, crashed slash landed, and it was their new home from that point on. Yeah, like I said, there's definitely a bit of strangeness that no one can remember what was happening before that. But and at this point, like this far in history, like no one's sure why that they think that there was a galactic war, but that's just kind of like the common consensus that there was this war out there that was happening, and the Arcadians managed to save these people, bring them to this place, and then this is where people live now. Kind of an interesting factoid. When you look up at the sky when you're standing on Illyria, you don't see, like, how whenever we stand here you see like a sky full of stars and everything like that. That's not the case here. Like the sky is actually pretty black. Like you see some stars here and there, and you could probably make a decent account to actually count them over a couple nights or something like that. Like it's still like they're still numerous, but like nowhere near what you see here. Um, yeah. So upon arriving on this planet, they discovered these. The people discovered these beings, or the beings discovered these people. They're referred to as the old gods. Um, they're not necessarily like a god in the form of like a creationary thing. Like some believe they are, some believe they're just these larger than life creatures that do have powers and abilities. It's kind of a blurry line. But yeah, some people do believe they are associated with the creation, or at least the guardian ship of the planet. The old gods are as followed. There's Nuea. She is the Earth Mother, the goddess of life and rebirth. She's the keeper of the forests. Okay. So these gods have two forms. The form that most people know them in, as far as their physical form, is usually this very large Titanus type creature. We're talking 60, 80 feet high, sometimes like up to 200 feet tall, that kind of thing. Like they're pretty gigantic, like, and then some might even be bigger than that. Uh, and then the other one is like, it tends to be like when people see the old gods in dreams, they tend to take on a little bit more of a humanoid appearance, but they still have like distinguishing characteristics beyond beyond that. But Nuea, she tends to look like this deer, like antelope type creature, but her body is covered with like vegetation and wildlife, or vegetation and like leaves, leafy vines, stuff like that. And on top of her horns, like there's this lush wreath of vegetation. Out of their back, there tend to be like these little lush trees that kind of spring up and everything like that. And her eyes are very blue, like a watery blue. And there's this mist that kind of cascades out of them at sometimes. This is something people have seen. Like this isn't like like this isn't like a mythology or anything like that. Like no, like people have seen and documented this creature walking around, and they've seen and documented them being able to do these things. But the mist that cascades like from her eyes, like usually it just kind of evaporates, but they've also seen it like kind of spread across the land and heal it up in a sense, or not even heal it, but like uh, accelerate vegetation growth. There's Neruma. She's the great beast, the Shadow Maul, and the Night Hunter. She looks like a large cat type body with these serpent wings. When I say serpent wings, like think of like a draconic type wings, and they kind of fold back behind her back. She's constantly like wrapped on, and she has very like bright orange eyes that pierce the night. Uh, she's like kind of wrapped in shadows at all the time. Like whenever she takes steps and everything like that, people see like wisps and shadows kind of coming out from her paws. Her pelt is like, yeah, it's very pure black, and like this very silky black, and she has golden eyes, which I had mentioned. There's Ataraxis, the bull god, the keeper of the fire, and the immovable mountain. He looks kind of he looks kind of like a minotaur. He's like the most humanoid in his titanus form. That out of like out of all the old gods, he is, like I said, he kind of looks like a humanoid body, but he's got like that large bull's head, and he's well known for like carrying around a hammer. He's not too much else about him. Like he tends to be the most friendly, I guess you would say, towards humanoid species. Like he tends to not mind reaching out or something like that. Whereas like the other gods tend to keep more. The other old gods tend to keep more to themselves. Like he's more interested in the advancement of sentient species. There's Bellatrix. Uh, she's the keeper of secrets, the night wind whisperer, and the mistress of illusions and deceptions. Her Titan form is this slender fox-looking creature that is usually cloaked in a thick mist or fog, so it's kind of hard to make out their details or features. But she also appears to have like these wispy spider-like legs that kind of come out the side, or she's often perched in a web. A lot of her features are unknown because of the mysterious nature of her, and she's kind of one of those, like she's like Neroma. Neroma and Bellatrix are like largely avoided as far as things go. Like they're not. It's not that they're unfriendly. It's just that they're not. They usually don't much care for the sentient species of the planet. Like they're more likely to devour you up than they are to lend a helping hand. Roku is the bastion of hope, the keeper of truth, and the unyielding spirit. He's kind of he's a large turtle with with an island on his back. He's also the keeper of the seas. Um, Actually, it might be the keeper of the seas, not the keeper of the truth. I'll have to double check that. He is kind of like the guardian of the oceans, but he's also, you know, like the bastion to like anyone who's seafaring or anything like that. Like he's kind of like that protector type spirit. Uh, he 100% can. Well, Ataraxis can definitely speak to sentient beings, but Oroku too. Like Oroku is, it's definitely been on record that Oroku will like speak to people. Like whereas other things is like they feel like there might be more of a feeling type thing associated with it as opposed to actual speech. Ori, the spirit of the wind, the keeper of the sad songs, and the guardian of lost souls, the last shadow or the shadow of death. Um, Ori is probably the smallest of the titans. It looks like a cross between like a serpent, like dragonish, with a hawk's head. It's like kind of like a smaller creature, very nimble, and its wings are colored. Like it's not like black or anything like that. Its wings have these like very iridescent looking feathers. Like they're like greens and like vibrant golds, oranges, and stuff like that. It's a very beautiful creature as far as how it's traditionally depicted. Ori's a bit like also on the mischievous side of things, like fleeting and fluttery, I guess would be the best way to describe it. Um, like Ori doesn't kill you or anything like that. Like it's just that they are kind of like the keepers of the passage of life, kind of like how like the Grim Reaper has his scythe. Like so, it's like, is he reaping people with his scythe, or is he kind of ferrying lost souls? Like Ori's very much on the ferrying of souls that have passed. For any reason or any cause, whether it's like old age, natural causes, or if it's like a more unpleasant or violent death. But yeah, Ori isn't seen as like a bad spirit or anything like that. Like people actually reach out to Ori a lot to kind of look over their loved ones after they pass. Um, Soul is the only elder god without a true Titan form, at least not that anyone has ever seen. Some people believe that she is she is the star, like that she is kind of like the what is it? The personification of the star that's found at the middle of the system. But like I said, no Titan form. She is this. What her form is she's probably around six or no, probably around between 5 and 6 feet tall. People will usually report, and she kind of looks like this being of pure like solar energy, like if you can imagine a sun that was walking around in an attractive woman's form. She is the light of the world, the sun-kissed, the goddess of beauty and radiance. Um, and she will also, okay, so she doesn't have a Titan form in the sense of of like one of the larger ones, but she also can take on the appearance of a very small looking phoenix. And when I say small looking phoenix, I mean humanoid size. Uh, but like her humanoid form is like unmatched beauty when it comes to that. But also like without, like I said, as far as an energy being goes, it's kind of you you know like you can see the chest and the hips and everything like that, but you kind of lack some of the details of other stuff. But she's kind of like this glowing orange, yellowish orange, and then she's got like these blue, like these really light blue, almost turquoise, like symbols all over her body. Always naked, always just people like sing songs about how attractive this goddess is. Yeah, so those are the old gods, and we'll get into a little bit about why they're the old gods and what they do and what purpose they serve. Just a little note here: Illyria has a diverse landscape, but we already did that. Okay, so the landmass is commonly called Nui, but is broken up into different areas. Most of the areas are temperate to warm, and some of the northern and southern parts are harsh, cold seasons, while the landlocked areas have dry desert-like conditions. Like I said, kind of everything. But like Nui proper is kind of the landmass that you guys live on. The edicts of the old gods. The old gods have kind of faded over the past, we'll say, I think about 1,000 years or so. Like they've been kind of quiet for the last like 800 to 1,000 years. It used to be like people would tell stories about them all the time, and people would say like, oh, I was out here and I saw Ori, circling overhead of this mountain, or I saw Ataraxis in his forge, that kind of thing, and stuff like that. But what is known is that they're incredibly powerful beings and creatures that can shape not just the world, but the creatures in it. They have these wide-ranging abilities that can encompass the entire planet, or at least the entire landmass that you guys live on. They're known for creating these things called edicts. Um, some people believe they're essentially powerful spells, but like spells on kind of like a godlike level. Uh, the first edict that they cast that was kind of like the introduction to the power of these beings, these guardians, these gods, the old gods, whatever you want to call them. There's like they have kind of many titles. It was called the Edict of Peace. So the Morning Star ship brought with it what we know as many modern weapons. Now these weapons haven't existed for millennia because it's just one of those ones where like it's an old tale of what kind of like where you gain respect from the old gods and stuff like that. So, like there might have been, some assault rifles, some laser type blasters, stuff like that. No one really has any details of what these things are, but just that there were these weapons of like these immensely powerful weapons on a personal scale. The refugees from the ship started to go out and settle the new lands, and fights and wars began to break out between the various races, whether it was who was settling what, resources, trying to rebuild civilizations. Like I said, people didn't remember what happened, but they kept with them the knowledge to, basic to what would be essentially to rebuild. What the Edict of Peace is it was this effect that I think it was Nessa or Nuia. I'm sorry, I think it was Nuia that cast it. I'll double check, but it's not overly important. I think it was a couple of them, but Nuia was kind of the cause of it. And the Edict of Peace ended up blighting all modern technology, all weapons, and destroying pretty much everything from the ship. Its pieces that were used to start up new cities and everything like that. So when I say blighted, like it caused like this rapid corrosion. Like anything that had like microchips and anything like that just stopped working. Any engines and vehicles like immediately stopped. It's like there's enough of this war. Like this isn't going to happen. This isn't the way we do things here. The Dara, who were widely regarded as the planet's keeper of knowledge when it comes to technology, pleaded with the old gods that that they could use this technology for good and not use it for war, at least some of it. And they managed to get an audience with the old gods, specifically Nuia, and they were able to work out a compromise where they were able to build some technology again, but weapons would be limited to the most simple devices. So, like blades, hammers, axes, and bows were the only projectile weapons they were allowed to build. So, if people were going to hunt and kill each other, they couldn't do it on a mass scale. So, there's no bombs, there's nothing like that. Technology-wise, overall, the planet has sort of rebounded. Like there are areas that where you would say that are modern to like modern futuristic, but they still don't have everything that you would expect these modern or futuristic things to have. Um, so it's kind of like a mix of modern, futuristic, and medieval. Uh, yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then there are areas that are just straight up rural that still rely on like horse-drawn carriage and like shovels to dig out wells and stuff like that. Like the outskirts of the civilization are still very rural, very like medieval times kind of technology. Um, an interesting note about this Edict of Peace is people throughout the years have tried to uh, bring back some of this old technology, and some like kind of it's passed down. I don't want to say through criminals because it's not necessarily criminals, it's not necessarily bad people because they just they want the technology and they want it to be brought back. But like every time someone creates something, like there's stories where it just corrodes. Like as soon as they finish it, as soon as its purpose is kind of not fulfilled, like they don't get to go out and kill someone with it, but like as soon as its purpose is kind of completed, like it corrodes into like this heap of like rust and scrap. So it's like an interesting persisting spell that exists, and that's kind of what an edict is. uh, the second edict was called the Edict of Grace. This one was specifically done by Nuia, slightly after the technology setback from the first colonist and the Edict of Peace. The Edict of Grace was delivered by Nuia personally to ensure that her new children would not go hungry. Uh, Whenever someone settles and attempts to grow food, no matter the location, food tends to grow. Even like in deserts and cold areas. Like if you basically pray right and make some offerings to Noea, like your crops are gonna grow. Like it was kind of a weird mystical thing. Like you could have like this little oasis garden in the middle of a desert. Uh, and things like blights and stuff like that don't tend to be a factor. People were aware of them before, but like this is just kind of people like today wouldn't even know what a blight is for the most part. Like unless you're very scientifically minded, it's just kind of information that's been lost to the ages. Now, this edict has seemed to very slowly weaken, uh, not to the point where people are starving or anything like that, but it just doesn't seem to have the potency of the original stories that were told. So that's kind of part of that might be that people have like embellished the story over the years, or it just might be that the spells are slightly weakened, but it persists nonetheless. Like you could still go out to a desert and you could still probably grow some crops there in the middle of the sand, especially if you do the proper prayers and stuff. The Edict of Storms. As the continent was explored and settled, various races attempt to cross the oceans once they basically reconstructed seafaring technology. Rocco declared that certain areas of the planet were just not meant for the visiting races. Uh, the best way to describe it is kind of like the Greeks with Olympus. Like there is a land of the gods kind of thing that exists off the main continent, and it's not a land that they want to share with the settling races. So, uh, when sailing too far from the mainland, a storm will basically develop that forces travelers to turn back. Uh, it's usually not lethal or anything like that, but if you keep attempting to push through, those people are just usually never seen again. Uh, Also, there's an interesting thing with the seas we'll get to later when we talk about the Titans. Um, the Edict of Power. Okay, so little is known about this edict and its effects. It's more of a rumor than an actual edict. Uh, over time on this planet, people have slowly started to develop powers, and by that I mean like supernatural, super, you know, metaphysical type abilities. Things like their like your soul force and everything like that, they fall on the mystic side, but like they don't usually fall on like the power scope. Like yeah, some like very few people unlock them and everything like that, but like we're talking about more like supernatural powers, kind of like a mutation kind of thing in the X Men universe, where it doesn't follow like a logical soul force kind of progression. So this isn't like it's not an official thing, but a lot of people believe that uh, that the old gods, or like being around these gods, like there's an edict in place that it might be like a passive effect or something like that, that basically has caused sentient races to begin to gain these powers. This is based on what Arcadians have said. Uh, Arcadians seem to know the most about what little is remembered from the old universe, but like Arcadians have said, like, you know, people don't have powers like this from what we can remember, and there's still very real gaps in their memory, but that it's just not a common thing. It's not something you usually expect to happen. But on this planet, for some reason, people do tend to get powers. And when I say powers, like don't think like full-on mutations, like you know Scott Summers blasting the beams out of his eyes. Like a lot of them tend to be minor, and they're usually called soul force expressions or expressions of the soul force, where they're these like little minor things. Like you might be able to see a little bit better. Like you might be able to have like you know sharper healing. You might be able to have like a you know a bit higher vertical jump than most people would be able to possess. Like usually they're very much on the small side. They're not full on mutations, but a lot of people, like more and not say a lot of people, more and more people over time have tended to get them. Um, the Edict of Silence. The group known as the Scions once held the western side of the continent and was believed, told, or of legend that they were manipulating or influencing one of the old gods for power and favor. It's unclear whether the race was wiped out or that their psychic abilities were simply stripped away and then they basically kind of merged with the human population because what's it called? Scions traditionally look human. Like there was no real way to tell them apart based on appearances. So with that in mind, something happened to them, whether or not they had their psionic power stripped away. But it's very much, it's kind of, the Edict of Silence is kind of like the Edict of Power, where it's based more on a legend. But there is a manifest that says there were 20,000 Scions, and no one has heard of a Scion for many thousands of years. But it's kind of like this history is kind of like a shared history that's taught to like most children and stuff like that. So it's like you would be familiar with the idea of a scion even though they haven't been heard. It's kind of a story that's been passed down from generation to generation, taught to each next new generation. And that's kind of like the information you can kind of garner from this is it's the story of the history of our planet. And most people are familiar with it. Some people don't care about it. You can choose, what you want to do with it. The next, there's these things called the Titans. Now, when I say the Titan form of the old gods, it's different from what I'm talking about now. The Titans are specifically I don't want to say species of creatures because they vary really widely, but like they're a kind of creature that is just immense in size. They generally don't have any powers or anything like that, like the old gods, but and they don't have like any humanoid forms like the old gods do or anything like that. But they usually come in three forms, but there is also a fourth one that's believed to be out there, but it's not as substantiated. What is there? Some believe that they are avatars of the old gods, or perhaps servants of sorts. Maybe they are like children or like younger forms of the old gods, but there's a very discernible difference between what the members of the old gods can do versus what a titan can do. Like a titan doesn't seem sentient, where all of the old gods are most definitely sentient. They usually come in three forms. There's the Eidolons. There's these very large bipedal or quadrupedal creatures, very alien looking as far as appearances go. They can be from anywhere from like 80 to 200 feet tall, and they're usually twisted masses of organic material, plant life, and sometimes metallic ruins. Like they tend to be like a reflection of where they're found on the planet, but like they're very like organic in nature. Like you can definitely tell that there's a life form, but it's kind of like a mixed match of life form and environment. Chimeras, they're usually a blending of natural wildlife. They tend to be smaller, anywhere from like 20 to 60 feet in height. Creatures that you'll see on this planet, like they have like Earth-like mirrors. Like there might be some like things that sort of look like wolves or bears or tigers or stuff like that. We won't get into like the whole wildlife spectrum that exists out there, but you have a very varied uh, animal kingdom on this planet, and chimeras tend to be larger forms of these creatures that are also combinations of which. So it's like you might see uh, like a turtle's back with a bear's head or something crazy like that. Yeah, but they're also very large and very powerful in the sense of they tend to be very strong. They're like very ferocious. Not all, like some of them are very passive and everything like that, but like if angered, they are not to be reckoned with. The Unerai, they're these large creatures that are almost the size of mountains. They're the largest of the Titan. Well, they're possibly the largest of the Titans. They're anywhere from 200 feet to 1,000 feet in height, uh, but they're largely made up of like rocks and like mineral formations. They're by far the most passive of the bunch. Like it's very rare to see an Unerai walking around or anything like that. Like they usually tend to be in like a static state. But like it's kind of like one of those ones like where you'll be hiking up a mountain and you'll hear like the mountain kind of grumble, but like you don't expect anything out of it because like the Unerai don't care about that. Like they're not up and about type, but like people have seen them on very rare occasions in history and documented where like they'll see this walking mountain like moving to a different area of the planet and settling down and changing the environment because of it. But again, this is probably something that hasn't been seen in hundreds, if not thousands, of years. People know where some of them are. Like they basically kept track of where exactly they were, and like you can go visit them and you can poke at them or do whatever you want. But like they just tend to be very passive, very docile, but they can also be very huge. The fourth one is more like a seafaring legend, but there's this class called the Leviathans. Uh, they're believed that there's like a Titan class that lives in the oceans that surround the Nui continent. Uh, they tend to be like, I don't want to say all necessarily snake or serpent like, but they tend to be like what you would imagine like giant water creatures to look like, somewhere between crocodile, snakes, and like large not amphibious, but like large sea creatures. Like if you remember some of those sea dinosaurs with like the four flippers, the huge body and the long neck, that kind of thing. But Leviathan are also like depicted throughout history as kind of terrifying, like much more monstrous. They, people sail on a regular basis and don't see them, but they also believe that the Edict of Storms uh, might be like in Leviathan water. Like that's like they believe that part of the reason why Oroku has kept people from sailing too far off the mainland is that the Leviathans are out there. So that's kind of always a real fear when it comes to exploration. It's like, yeah, if you push too far, the storms are there, but it's like, is there also like these giant sea creatures that can swallow even the largest ships? And the Leviathan, no one even knows the size of these things, but like from base reports like of seeing these like like small portions of the creatures, like they might be the largest yet. So being larger than 1,000 feet potentially makes them pretty impressive as far as size goes. Okay, I think we'll stop there for now, and I'll start a second video. That way you can break this up a little bit if you want. All right, pause for there, player.